All right, we're going to continue our work now, and we're going to be jumping into section 16, which I'm just pulling back over, so you can see what I'm putting on screen. This is going to have us continue our work from chapter 15, if I remember correctly, with the MVC Simple app that we were building. This chapter focuses on doing validation, and then it tries to also kind of repeat a couple of really important concepts that go with MVC. And you can see the first one that they're bringing up here is the dry principle, which is don't repeat yourself. And that's, one of those what core principles of MVC. So if you create something, you don't want to have to be redoing it each time. So the whole point is to write less code and do more work in the process. All right, so what they want us to do right now is to add validation to our model so that we put good data into our application and not, something that's going to make it crash, like we did before, where I was putting in Java the Hutt and trying to be clever with the date, and it didn't like that at all. So there was nothing wrong with what was going on there. It just happened to be bad data for me. So that's why we use validation, is to keep, basically bad data from going into our data structures and breaking things. All right, let's go ahead and, as it indicates here, update the employee class by adding some new annotations to it. If you remember, those annotations are those square bracketed things. All right, so let's follow what they're doing here. So this is going to happen in the employee class, and how do you know which one it is? Well, this is in the models folder. It just tells us right there. So if you're curious, that's the where we're doing it. All right, just moving things back over to screen number 2 for a little simplicity here. All right, so let's go to the models folder and pull up employee. And then right from there, we're going to be throwing in a really this is kind of interesting, I think. Because it's so simplistic in its execution. So the first thing that we're going to do here, so I'm at the very top of page 129, and I'm going to add this to our code. So notice what this does here. It says string length 60, minimum length equals 3. So how do you read that exactly?
So it needs to be greater than 3.
Okay.
And can be no more than 60 characters?
That's correct, Javier. So if we just put in 60, it would have like no minimum. But here, we're saying that it does have to have a minimum of at least 3 characters. Now you will notice that this is underlining red, so we want to make sure that gets fixed somehow. So let's go ahead and click the little drop down here, which will actually give us a clue. At least I thought it would. All right, and we do need to pull in the data annotations model. How do I know that? Well, first of all, on page 128, it shows that library is up there, whether we're using it or not. But that's what makes these work. So it doesn't kind of happen from thin air. That syntax is read from a class file that's created somewhere else. And so that's telling us that the name field now has to be at least 3 and at most 60. We're going to add in a couple of other annotations, and for this one, for the next thing, we're going to actually add several of them. So I'm going to actually add a couple blank lines here and throw that in. So the first thing that we're going to do, and notice this is kind of fascinating, for the display name, we're going to switch it to joining date. So yeah, we can actually coerce that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the data type is just a date. All right. And I don't know if you guys remember looking at the database that there's also a timestamp in there too. And then a display format and how it will show will be controlled by us. So this is just a pattern that you can pull from. There's many different patterns, but this one's going to put year first, then month, then day. So we're kind of flipping it. because that's not how it is right now on the screen. And then it has this extra little tool it throws in, apply format in edit mode equals true. So what do you suppose that might do? Just a wild guess. I don't know. Would it be cool if it would put up one of those calendars for us so we could just pick the day? Okay, just think about that. Because that might be what it's doing. Not that I'm giving you a hint, but I might be giving you a hint. All right, let's do the for age also. We're going to have some issues here because I set up some ages that did not fit that range, right? We're going to have a little fun with it. We're going to set the age up to 600 just in case. I mean, we are dealing with people from outer space. Who knows, right? But they got to be at least 22. In fact, I don't think that works either because Jabba the Hutt's pretty young. He's only a couple years old. So let's say he's got to be at least 2. Got to be at least a toddler. All right, I'm just having fun with it, but you can actually specify stuff like that in here. All right, now the next thing that they want us to do is it says now we also need to add limits to the database, except let's go back because I do have that stuff open here and we're looking more for the design version here. So if I click on the name field and it says shows the name property is set to nvarchar max as seen in the following screenshot. All right, so what we're going to do is actually not going to change that because what I could do, right, is I could just type in there and change the name field to match what I have above, right, and actually run it into the database with a SQL statement. I could totally do that. But we are going to use a different approach to do it. And this is really kind of a key part of MVC2. And that is we're going to write code that will allow us to change the database. So kind of a code first approach once again. And then when we do that, we're going to run it as what they call a migration. But migrations don't automatically happen. We have to actually get a tool in here that lets it happen. So here's how we're going to do it. Let's go up to the Tools menu. From the Tools menu, you want to choose the NuGet Package Manager, and then we're going to run the Package Manager console, the command line. All right, so now you can see down below, I have a little flashing cursor. And I'm just going to pull the console up so it's just a little bit bigger, and then it finally gave me the Package Manager prompt. All right, so now we're going to type in some commands one by one. The first one is enable migrations. All right, so can't do any migrations as they call them until we do that. So go ahead and press enter. It's going to take a moment. You see the little hourglass popped up for a second. It's trying to do some stuff in the background. We're being patient. I don't know if you noticed Solution Explorer changed a little bit. Notice checking if context targets, right? All right, so it looks like code first migrations enabled for the project. It's kind of interesting that we have to do that from a command line, but that's how we do it in this environment. For those of you that have worked with other MVC systems, you'll know that that's typically the case in those systems too. All right, and then we want to make sure that this is turned on, add migrations for data annotations. So in other words, what that means is it's going to look at our project, look for those square bracketed data annotations we just put in, and then run any migrations that are related to those. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter once again. It's going to take a moment to execute the code. All right, and it threw back some stuff that's red. That's not good, right? Yeah, it's probably not good.
That was my, wait, oh.
Did you have the same issue?
Yeah, but this was for my enable migrations, and I forgot to capitalize the E.
Yep, and you know what? That's a really good point, is make sure that your stuff is spelled correctly. And that's the first thing I'm checking too. Did I spell annotations correctly? Add migrations, that was all lower, oh, see, I did screw up. Okay, so here, I'm going to go back to the console here, and I'm going to hit an up arrow. Okay, so the up arrow will repeat my last command, and what did I do wrong? I added an S here. Yeah. All right, if you're stuck on this, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let me run mine here first, and then I'll come and help you guys do yours, okay? So let me go ahead and just bravely press enter here, and hopefully this time it'll work without the red. Boy, that red gets your attention though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Nothing like something in red to tell you you're screwing up. Thanks a lot, Microsoft. Although the bright yellows kind of gives me that feeling too, honestly. All right. So notice what it did. It said scaffolding migration data annotations. Okay, we'll go back and look later. So what it did, what does that mean? Okay, that means it built the code to make the changes in the database, but it has not yet executed them. So now we will actually do that process. So we're going to say update, database, and notice that one's all lowercase. All right, and then notice that it seems to have worked. It time and date stamped it, and it says running seed method. All right, so as soon as I step up here and help out the other people here in class, I'm going to come back in and we're going to take a look at this and see what it did. All right, we struggle a little bit here in class to get everybody working, but we did. And here's one little useful tip that one of our students pointed out. I didn't have to make this step, but one of our other students did. You see right now I'm going to the Tools menu and Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. So if you're continuously trying to run this very first command, enable migrations, and then you get like red error messages each time, we determined that one possible fix might be to come up here to the Package Manager, check your installed frameworks, and isn't that interesting, Brenda, that mine actually is set for version 6.2. So what we discovered is if you're using, I guess, 6.3, it might cause some issues with the migration. So come in here and switch yourself to version 6.2. And notice that mine, maybe it followed through from the previous setup. That could be. So if you do have 6.3 as the one that's enabled, what you might want to do is actually uninstall 6.2 and then uninstall 6.3 and go down to 6.2, and hopefully that will fix your issue. So that's just a helpful tip, and I think it's interesting that that's the one that came up on mine. Very, very interesting. Okay, so hopefully that isn't going to run into an issue for you guys. All right, but thank you for the fix. Okay, let's now take a look at what those commands actually did. So the one made it possible for us to do migrations. Migrations are basically the act of writing code in your database and then basically seeding that information into your database, either the structure or the data of your database. So once we had turned the switch on, then we added a migration for data annotations. So if you remember, we had gone into this file here, the employee model file, and added, these square bracketed annotations in there. And then we went ahead and we ran update database, and then once that all executes, that actually executes those differences in the database stuff, it'll give you an updated file here that shows you what action it actually took. So it went through and it actually wrote a migration file, and you notice how it created a migration folder here. So every time you make changes to the database or the data structure and you run it through the migrations, it keeps track of it, and it keeps a log of all the different things that it did with a date and timestamp on it, so you can trace it all back. All right. It is also possible ultimately to roll back those migrations, by the way, if you're curious. And hopefully you won't have to do that, but we wrote these annotations in, we ran the migrations to actually make that part of the database. And so now if we actually go back and we look at the design of the table, and I think we might have to do a refresh here, and I don't know if that's even an option. In fact, we might want to close this and then reopen it from the SQL Server Object Explorer. So I'm going to view the designer. And now you notice how the varchar thing changed itself, right? Where before it was set to what? It was set to max, and now it's set to 60, which seems more reasonable for a name anyhow. And then, you know, there's some of these other values here as well. So I assume that all those annotations were written in, and then of course we would see it affect our data here as well if there were issues. All right, let's go ahead and close some of that stuff down. And that's kind of like a heavy thing that we just did, and I don't want to treat it lightly because we were able to go into an existing model, throw in some annotations to basically alter the database without altering the database itself. Then we turned on the migration tool, ran the migrations to create the file to execute the code, and then we hit the update database button, which actually changed the database itself. So it's kind of like a multi-step process, but that's how you do migrations. All right, and then they want you, of course, to test this. So I'm at the bottom of page 132 right now, trying to do a test. And what we want to do is put some invalid data in here. And like one thing that we could test, for example, is that if we only put in 2 characters, that it might break the name. So let's go ahead and run this. Let's see what happens. Let's get the browser back over where it belongs. Mine's taking its sweet time to load up. That's okay.
Oh, I see it. It's a month date here.
All right. Let's go to the correct URL here. All right. So you see it loaded everything up just fine. Now I'm going to try to create a new thing with just a like 2-letter name, and notice how it put the little format thing in there for us. And then do you see how cool it brings up a calendar for you? And I forget what my age range was. Was it 2 to 600? Let's put in 601 and click create. And then you notice the validation kicks in. Now, let me ask you this. Did I write that message? No, I did not. So where the heck did it come from? Well, they have a script that's built in that generates this, right? The field name must be a string with a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 60. The field age must be between 2 and 600. So they have some sort of script that goes in there and automatically writes the error message for you. How nice is that? Right? If you wanted, you could also right-click and inspect this and see where it sits in the DOM, right? And you see that it's got a field validation error class and a text danger class applied to it. And so you could write CSS that specifically would highlight it or make it red or whatever the case may be. All right. So if you want to fix this, let's put in a name. You put in like Jar Jar Binks, right? Is that right? And let's say Jar Jar is a ripe old age of 599. And then that should actually work. All right, so that's proof that we were successful. If you want to try it again, you could maybe put in I don't know, Princess, how do you spell Leia? Like that, maybe? And we'll give her an age that's valid. All right, she's probably like 30, something like that. And she needs, well, you know, what if I just try to type in text here? You know, notice I can't even type in text in the date field. That's kind of one of my other things. But you can type in numbers, and I think that calendar thing is pretty darn awesome. You click create, and we have yet another entry. All right. Seems like everything's working good to me. Those error messages that you see, by the way, those are ones that are generated by the jQuery validation engine. So that's really what's doing that work, and that the book indicates that. All right, we've successfully completed section 16, and given that we're at the end of class, we're going to call it for the night. We're going to do the security thing next week. You know, I like it part of this unit, but I think we still have enough time on the due date, and I'll double check it, and if we don't, I'll adjust. But let's call it a night. I think that was kind of a challenging little night, but you know what? Ultimately, we did get it to work, and everything's behaving the way that we're hoping. So this video ends here.